Well guys, welcome to another trail video in the Tundra. The last time we were at Charlie's Creek and it was a little bit less of what we expected it to be, or a little bit less than what we expected it to be in terms of how the trail would be. But right now we are in a lot of traffic actually. We're on our way to Hurricane Creek this time and we have a few buddies up in front of us. We got somebody in a Jeep Wrangler, a JK. We've got a buddy in a Lexus LX, essentially a Land Cruiser. And we got a buddy in another Tundra, but we just pulled out of a rest stop that's a little bit before we get to the trailhead, and then we immediately after the rest stop, we encountered this, and we're not really going anywhere. So once we get close to the trailhead, which is literally immediately right off the right side of the road, then we'll pick back up with you guys there, because this isn't really going much of anywhere all that quickly. So yeah, we'll see if we can regroup. They're all like, I think, like 5 cars ahead of me, 4 cars ahead of me, because they merged a lot quicker than I did. But either way, you know, such is life with merging sometimes. But like I said, guys, I'll catch up with y'all once we find the turnout for the actual trailhead. All right, I think we're just coming up to the turnoff now. It's kind of in the middle of a construction zone, but yeah, I see everybody else up there. I see everybody else up there, and the gate's open, so we should be good to go. Hopefully this doesn't fall off like it did last time when we were in Georgia. All right. Ready? Yeah. And then there's a connector road that comes back down. So you don't come back down fully. Now this section is what I would consider to essentially be the approach of the trail. I wouldn't necessarily consider the trail to have started just yet. The trail essentially starts at a water crossing, which is probably the deepest water crossing on the entire trip. It definitely was on this trip for sure, because we went right after, and I mean literally the next day after a torrential downpour. I mean, it rained a bunch the night before. We actually drove through the rainstorm the night before in the BRZ, and considering the fact that the tires, especially the front tires on that car, are not exactly in the best shape at the moment, it was a little bit sketchy on the highway, but it was a lot better coming out here in the truck the next day. That's awesome. After making your way through the approach road for a little while, you'll come up on a few buildings on the right, and you'll notice that the creek is a lot closer than it was when you initially started the trail. Now, after this point is when I would say the actual trail really does start, and once you go ahead and cross the first creek crossing, you're pretty much on the trail from that point on. And one of the interesting things that I found about this trail was that it was a lot longer than I expected it to be. We were on this trail at least for a couple of hours. Now, granted, we stopped quite a bit. You know, we stopped, got out of our rigs, talked for a little while, you know. But even with that being said, there was still, it seemed like you would go around a corner and there would just be more trail, and then you'd be on that section for a while, go around another corner, and then there would just be more trail. If you like longer trails, it would definitely be one that I feel you would really enjoy. Now, as far as how the Tundra itself did, I mean, I know that we are working with a drop bracket lift kit here, which is not exactly ideal, but at the same time, it still did really, really well. There was nothing that it couldn't make it up. There was nothing that it couldn't make it over, or really nothing that it couldn't make it through. I do feel like if the rocks were a little bit more intense than they were, we might have started to have some issues. But once again, that's why I'm doing upgraded tie rods and control arms as soon as the tie rods get here. At the date of filming this video, I have the control arms ready to go in, but the tie rods aren't here yet, the upgraded tie rods. So I'll update you guys once those arrive, because I want to put both the control arms and the tie rods on at the same time, so I only have to do one alignment instead of 2 alignments. But at the end of the day, those should help at least ease some of my nerves in terms of either breaking a tie rod or completely throwing my alignment off when I'm out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So there's one more creek crossing, and then there's that mud. So.
Yeah.
But
now, with this being after a pretty heavy rain, most of the trail surface was pretty, I wouldn't say flooded out, but there was just a lot of puddles, a lot of mud, a lot of standing water, and I was trying to make sure that we didn't really tear anything up. I was just kind of, you know, cruising through it about, like, right here. Honestly, I doubt we were even going any more than, like, 5 miles an hour, but the cool thing about this trail is that, you know, as you're going through it, you really do feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you really do feel pretty isolated out here, especially because of the fact that you have absolutely no cell service whatsoever for the entire, you know, roughly 2-ish hours that you're going to be on this trail. The only thing is, you know, if you were to break down out here, it would be a little bit, it's not that it would even be sketchy, it would just be a very long hike back to where you could get help. And that's why I would recommend going out here with a group of people, although it's not necessarily the most challenging trail in the world. I have seen, you know, just random stuff break on a vehicle in an area where you wouldn't think it would break. And because of that, I mean, especially if you're coming out here after there was like a big rain or something like that, I would probably recommend going with people, especially if you're in a more stock rig. But at the same time, I mean, that Tundra behind me, the other Tundra, the Gen 1, he made it through everything literally no problem, just fine.
Are you enjoying this trip?
Sure.
Yeah, me too.
It's starting to be a little bit more uphill, but not much. Kind of been, honestly, like a combination of just mud, like slight washouts. We haven't gotten to the big mud section yet. I haven't been up here before, and from like everything I've seen and heard, there's a big mud section a little bit further on. Haven't gotten to that yet. Hopefully it's not too bad considering the fact that we're literally doing this right after a massive rainstorm. So hopefully it won't be too bad. We'll see.
Now, this section right here, especially looking down the hill as you watch my truck come up the hill, there's a major case of the GoPro effect happening here, where a GoPro essentially makes everything look flat. I can assure you that this is anything but flat, and it was actually a really, really fun climb. Now, probably the coolest part of the climb was this little mini rock obstacle. It wasn't huge, but as you'll see as the camera pans to the left in just a moment, it actually, like, you kind of have to take, you know, a little bit of a different line depending on what kind of vehicle you're in, whether you're in a shorter wheelbase or a longer wheelbase. This thing handled it no problem at all on the 37s. I mean, spun just a tiny bit because it was wet, but other than that, absolutely no issue getting through that at all. One of the coolest things, though, was the guy behind us in a completely stock first-gen Tundra that made it through absolutely everything that we did with no problem whatsoever. Now, I wish I had more footage of that climb, but we had a little bit of an issue with the camera, and it ended up corrupting the rest of that particular climb, and like I said before, I wish we had the rest of that footage, but no worries, because you will see that truck again later on in the video.
There's a good filming spot up here.
Absolutely, yeah.
You want to see what it looks like?
Let's take a look.
Now, this section definitely did not look as rutted out or as deep as it did in some of the videos that I've seen of it before, and I'm pretty sure that they came through here and added new dirt to this section to fill some of the ruts, because if you've seen any of the videos of this trail from about like a year to a year and a half ago especially, these were way deeper. I mean, essentially there were vehicles that were going through here on 35-inch tires and bigger that were, you know, essentially spinning the majority of the way through. Whereas, I mean, we had, like you saw previously, a Lexus LX that kind of just cruised through it. I mean, it was slick, but that was about it. And then my truck coming through on 37s, there really wasn't even, it didn't even come much up the tires. So they definitely did add dirt to this section, like I said before, or at least new dirt. But still, you know, a cool section, still a fun section. But at the end of the day, certainly not as challenging as I was expecting based on some of the videos that I had seen of it previously. And then once again, here's that first-gen Tundra absolutely just trucking along with no issues whatsoever. Even some of the obstacles further on up the trail, it still walked through them no problem. He had to give it a little bit of throttle in some sections, but still, they pretty much had no issue whatsoever. Now, it didn't happen a lot on this trail, but there were a couple of times where my full-size truck definitely felt a bit large and a bit, I wouldn't say out of its element, but a bit larger than the trail was intended for. And this was one of those sections. There were a couple of sections that were like this, where essentially both doors were in the trees on the side of the road. Now, thankfully, I didn't scrape anything major. I didn't, you know, like hit any large logs or branches or anything like that. But there were a couple of sections where if you're not okay with like getting a couple of scratches on the side of your rig, I don't know if I would recommend taking a full-size truck through there. I mean, if you don't care about brushing up on some trees, then you'll be fine. You could take a full-size truck through here, no problem. But if scratches bother you, I don't think it would be the best area for that. A little farther down the trail, there was also this abandoned bus that seems like it's been here for essentially forever. I have no idea how it got back here. I don't know the history of it, but it's a very interesting thing to see in a place like this. After passing by the bus, it was a little bit more just mud and some cutout tight trail sections that seemed to go, again, like I said before, kind of on and on. And a little bit later on, the trail did get very, very rocky. I'm not sure if that was a result of it washing out over time or if that particular surface is just that rocky. I mean, there were a couple of areas where if you weren't careful, especially when it was wet, your front tires would just slip down and into another crevice in between a couple of rocks. And there was one time where it did that, made a little bit of a loud clank, and I was really internally worried that I broke something, but I looked at everything and everything seemed fine, and it literally drove back from the trail just fine. So I think everything is all good.
Well, we're past the mud section now, and, well, I shouldn't say the mud section because there's kind of mud everywhere, but the quote-unquote mud section, and honestly, like, I don't know how far in we are, but this trail is super fun. And, like, the fun part about this one is that there are definitely places where, you know, you kind of need to strategize a little bit, but, like, a stock vehicle, for the most part, can still do it. I mean, we have a stock first-gen Tundra behind us that, you know, he's pretty much doing everything we're doing. I mean, sometimes he has to give it a little bit more momentum up some obstacles, but that's pretty much about it. And like, even though there are a lot of obstacles that he can still do, it's still really fun when you have big tires. So it's a really nice, varied trail in that respect. Like, it's probably one of the most fun trails we've done in this area so far. Especially after the big rainfall we had last night, it certainly makes it a little bit more interesting. Is this a creek crossing or a washout? Probably just a washout. Although I have a gigantic hood, so sometimes it's hard to see that.
Yeah.
TJ might spray right.
Crazy thing is that after making it to this clearing, we were essentially only halfway through the trail, if that. I mean, we had quite a bit more driving time to go, although I will say that that first section of the trail was a lot more muddy, creek crossing, washout type style of driving, and then the second half of the trail is a lot more kind of rocky. It gets a little bit tighter. There's a little bit more of a drop off on one side, a little bit more strategy and some obstacles, but once again, even that stock Tundra in the back, no problem. Now, as you make your way through the rest of the trail, it eventually finishes at a connecting service road, essentially a fire road, which will take you up to a place called Max Patch, which actually crosses with the Appalachian Trail. Now, is it a trail that I would do again? Absolutely. I actually had a really, really good time on this trail, and I feel like whether it was, you know, dry the previous day or a rainstorm the previous day will have a dramatic effect on your experience on this trail. But at the end of the day, there is still a very wide range of vehicles that can make it through and make it through no problem. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video and would like to see more real-world off-road adventures, let me know any thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. I do plan on upgrading a couple of couple of parts of my filming rig soon. I want to add an extra camera. I want to add like a couple more mounts, and I'm really excited to see what we can do with these videos in the near future, as well as what other trails and obstacles we can take on as we continue to upgrade the truck. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Please do let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, and I will see y'all in the next one. Talk to y'all later.